In a sense, the whole of the story of Charles Dickens starts here in these magnificent surroundings. This is Somerset House. In the 19th century, it was home to the Navy Pay Office, which is where Dickens's father, John, had his first job when he was 19 years old, and where he met the sister of a fellow clerk, Elizabeth, and he married her in the splendid church of St. Mary le Strand, which is just across the road from here. The Navy, and in a way the sea, dominated the first 10 years of Charles Dickens's life. He was born in Portsmouth and spent a good chunk of time, perhaps the happiest years of his life, in Chatham. And when he left Chatham, he came back to London, aged 11, and that was really the commencement of all his miseries. Just down the river, Hungerford Bridge was the site of the blacking warehouse where he was sent to work. That experience of being employed at the age of 12 in a tumble-down, rat-infested warehouse doing the dullest mechanical labour day in and day out is the formative event, really, of Dickens's childhood. This gateway was built by the first Duke of Buckingham in the beginning of the 17th century, and this is where the Thames ran up to. The waterfront was covered with various kinds of warehouses and factories, among them being the factory called Warren's. The warehouse itself was on Hungerford Stairs, and that's where Dickens spent his days with his fellow apprentices, doing this incredibly boring mechanical job, and Dickens trying desperately to keep himself together. He must under no circumstance let anybody know that he felt anything, any pain, any distress, and try to make people laugh, basically. So the factory moved. In fact, it upgraded. It came to a rather more salubrious part of town. Although it was not so damp and probably not rat-infested, it had one very unattractive aspect, which is it was very dark, and so the boys worked in the window for the extra light, and that meant that passers-by could see them working. And this was deeply humiliating and shaming for Dickens, but it had one happy advantage, which is that his father, now out of the debtor's jail, happened to pass by the window one day, saw his son in there, and made up his mind to take him out of the warehouse. Dickens was now free to resume his education, which is what he dreamt of for so long. If you keep going along the Strand until you come to Waterloo Bridge and then turn left, you come into Wellington Street. Dickens created his first magazine, something he dreamt of for years, decades in fact, and he called it Household Words. The magazine was very successful. Dickens wrote a lot for it, he edited the work of his contributors, and then the whole drama of his separation from his wife came up. He wrote a statement about it for a publication. He wanted it to be on the front page of Punch, which was also published by Bradbury and Evans, his publishers, and they thought it was inappropriate for a comic magazine and refused to do it. And he took against his publishers, turned against them savagely, and decided to end the magazine and started a rival magazine called All the Year Round. And just to rub their noses in the dirt, he took offices only one block up from the Household Word. This is where the editorial offices were, and that's indeed where he stayed. At the top floor was his apartment. He was still editing All the Year Round when he died in 1870. One of the young men who worked in his office, George Sala, said that it was a sort of comic, that wherever you went in London, if you went to Fulham, suddenly there was Dickens walking through. If you went up into Hampstead Heath, there was Dickens. If you went into the East End of London, suddenly, turning the corner, was Dickens again. He was everywhere, and he sort of still is in my imagination. It was Dickens's delight to walk round London with his friends and with new friends and with visitors from America or from France or wherever, and point out, as it were, Dickens's London. He was as much a myth as a man, even in his own lifetime. He celebrated his own existence in these places. It's remarkable how much of it remains intact.